What's up, y'all? It's back. We're back. It's time for part two of the Skew and A. It's Thursday, January 26th, 1:15 p.m. on the left coast as we sit down to record this. I think producer Matt's going to have it up tomorrow sometime. If you watched last week, you know we got going and got a little too enthusiastic and didn't get but about halfway through, so we said we'd finish it up later, which is what we're going to do right now. So, yeah, Mark, how you feeling?
Yeah, good, buddy. I'm glad we're gonna finish this. I didn't want to leave anybody out.
Right.
I think people took the time to write us, and you know, it's a more
Yes.
fun hearing other people's ideas for once instead of my own. Spit back at me.
Yes, I agree. But also to all you patrons out there, it probably will influence that would be all of you. No one can see this who isn't a patron. It will impact the general schedule, but not in any major way, and it'll still be fine. But normally we do the bonus skews every other week. We're doing it back to back weeks this time because of aforementioned reasons, and but it'll be fine. Don't worry your pretty little heads about that. It's all going to work out just fine. So, I mean, with all that said, I guess I'm just going to jump right back into it. I reckon
All right.
we stopped with Sherry Patterson's question about the lies we would tell. We answered that one at the end last time, which means we are now on to Amy D's question, which reads: So I caught Sheldon Whitehouse's speech on the Supreme Court in the Senate. Apparently, he had at the time done 19 of them on the corruption there. I'm so disgusted by the way the court has been taking money and travel from extreme money groups. Any insight on how we shake ethics into the shit show over there?
Yeah. I didn't see this specific speech, but Sheldon Whitehouse has been on this tip for a long time. He seems to be the only one who cares, which is frustrating because it's there was a guy who was a Christian activist who came forward because he started feeling guilty about all the lobbying and covert stuff they were doing Supreme Court justices. But yeah, like Supreme Court's not subject to any sort of ethics rules. The rest of the federal judiciary is, but once you make it the Supreme Court, you can do whatever you want. I think they get wined and dined. They get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to give speeches at to private organizations. You know, the right wingers, though, there's not that much money on the left.
No.
I think when Scalia died, he was on like a private hunting junket. You know, one of those things where rich people chain up deer to shoot.
Yeah,
Um,
deer. I saw a documentary once called "Surviving the Game," where these rich
yeah.
guys were taking homeless dudes out into the woods and hunting them down for sport, and it was really
Mhm.
really eye opening. I thought, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. Would you be surprised to find out that they got like a people hunt somewhere like deep in the mountains? Some of these guys,
N-
I'd totally buy it.
No, yeah, it's really hard to get your thrills once you're that rich. You've
Right.
done everything else. But yeah, the Ice T classic, "Surviving the Game." If you
Yes,
haven't
Ice
seen it,
T,
it's
Rutger
fantastic.
Hauer, Gary Busey,
Hmm.
Charles S. Dutton. I loved that movie when I was a kid. When
Hmm.
I was like teenagerish or whatever. I watched that movie a bunch of times, and I bet it holds up. I haven't revisited it, but maybe I will because I feel like it probably holds up. It definitely, not going to feel any less relevant. I don't think.
No, yeah, if they made it nowadays, it'd be Ice T's character would be some like down on his luck ex special forces veteran. But that movie is just like, yeah, I'm just tougher than you because I'm homeless and you guys are soft.
Uh, didn't they do a flipped version? I never did watch it, but they put that movie out that was like The Hunt or something, and it was
Mhm.
like I think wasn't it like coast like elites hunting like you know rural or like rednecks or Trumpy types or something. It was super controversial. You remember it was going to come out and then it got pushed because people got all pissed off. But then they did finally put it out, but I never gave a fuck to watch it anyway. But what was the deal with that?
I
Do you
enjoyed
know?
it. It wasn't nearly the movie that they had. So it is about like coastal elites hunting MAGA types.
Yeah.
Um, but like the message of the movie is not anti. Like you got the release date got pushed because Trump's people saw it and thought it was in. I don't know why they thought that a movie like Coastal Elites hunting MAGA types was anti-MAGA because the protagonist of the movie is played by Betty Gilpin, who's one of the people being hunted, right?
Right.
So the media literacy is through the floor in this country. But anyway, the moral of the movie ended up being about like how political division has left us all like making worse assumptions about each other, and yada yada yada. It wasn't like it didn't take a side other than everybody stopped being violent to each other.
Right.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, good movie though.
but yeah, the Supreme Court, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that could stand to do to the Supreme Court, in my mind. Some changes that ought to be made because it's just far too powerful of an institution, and the fact that they're all there forever, no matter what, uh, is
Yeah,
somewhere that I
there
would
has
start.
we talked about this before, but Jenny Thomas makes all the money for her and Clarence, and her job is basically she runs a one woman lobbying shop that files amicus briefs with the Supreme Court. So like an organization gives Jenny $500,000, and they file an amicus brief that her husband's going to read, and he gets to share the money. And like we know, she was involved in January 6th, at least peripherally, and there hasn't been a single public hearing about it. Congress has the power to impeach him. And we go round and round about this, but Democrats don't seem to understand that they have the ability to manufacture political will. Like you can sway public opinion. You don't have to just poll and then do whatever the poll says. Because the public, we're all raised to respect the Supreme Court as like this wise council of elders who like have our best interest in mind. And it's just like it's always been like a stopgap for the rich elites to keep corporate friendly regulations and laws. It's like except for a brief period in the middle of the 20th century when they had some good civil rights opinions. So it's just been, let me give you an example. There's a case right now before the Supreme Court. It's a labor case where I forget the specifics of the industry, but let's say it's a trucking company that hauled potatoes, right? So when they struck and the merchandise on the trucks went bad, and the company is suing the union to replace the product that got ruined from the strike. And it's like, yeah, the whole point of a strike is to economically damage your employer. That's the
Right.
whole fucking point. So it would be horrifically anti-labor to make them on the hook. Because what's the
Yes.
word for it when you're forced to do a job that you don't want to do?
You're right. Yeah.
It's slavery, right?
Indentured slavery. Yeah. One of the
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
If you force people to
So
do something, but you pay them a pittance or whatever, is that what indentured servitude is? And then slavery is when you give them nothing and make them do it, right?
right.
I don't know why I'm
Yeah.
splitting hairs semantically with these terms, but yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
The whole point of a strike is to prove their worth by
Mm-hmm.
inflicting, economic or financial retribution onto the
Right.
company, and so making them liable for that just defeats the whole entire purpose.
Right. And also so the effect of that is going to be, well, they've already set up the paradigm where a strike won't work, right? Because we have to keep going to work. Otherwise we have to pay the company for their losses. So it's like they're basically giving private companies the ability to draft employees like to the goddamn army in a wartime. It's like the implications of it are ridiculous, but nothing's too clownish for a Supreme Court. Once these like bow tie Harvard types put their mind to rationalizing something, they can get anywhere they want.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right. Next question is from Jan Nyblock, who says, do you think that the damage this group of fascists are doing to Congress can ever be fixed? Will our country ever go back to being non-fascist?
The short answer is sure, it's possible. We need. You got to start with organizing, then you got to change the courts, and then you got to undo gerrymandering, and then it's a long road. But the longer road of this question is like this country has often been through periods that could be called. I mean, what was Jim Crow but fascism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the period between slavery and Jim Crow was like 30 years, 40 years. So, and then I think progress comes in waves, like I know I sound bleak and hopeless all the time, but like, yeah, we can right the ship. It just takes, time and effort and, making your case, organizing.
I just don't think they're winning hearts and minds at a high
No.
enough rate or level. And I mean, that's how it seems to me. I know they're like able to keep a stronghold, and it's alarming the number of people who are down with it. But still, at the end of the
Hmm.
day, it's like, unless you're a self-hating type, there's one very narrowly defined type of person who, like, they are for. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Right.
everybody else they are against. And I just don't see that as being a long term winning strategy in a country that's becoming more diverse and all
Right.
that shit as we
As
go. That's what I'm telling myself anyway.
as long as the majority can make their will reflected in the political
Right.
system, which is one of
Right.
the reasons they're going so hard. Like,
Yes.
it's a perverse incentive structure where the more unpopular they get, the more aggressive they get because they know no one agrees with them. You
Yeah.
know. So yeah, if you want to, yeah, I guess you'd start with destroying public education, which is what they're trying to do. I before we logged on, I saw like a thing went viral from a teacher. She had a he I think had a Eli Wiesel quote about the Holocaust. It's like how you must always stand with the oppressed or whatever, and the school made her take it down because it wasn't even handed. Take him down,
Right.
made him take it down. It's like that was ridiculous to me because everyone sees themselves as the oppressed, even the like the Christo-fascists in America. They see Christianity as under. So like I can hardly think of anyone outside of an out and out Nazi who agreed with the Holocaust, finding that remotely controversial. But yeah,
Right. Yeah, I know, but that's where we're at. But yeah, but like you said, I think that, I mean, that's part of the problem is that they still have as much power as they do, considering, what actual percentage of people are on board with their shit. And that's part of the problem. They have
mm-hmm.
an outsized amount of power, but I still just think at the end of the day, uh, I just don't see them, pulling it off long term. But that's maybe a telling myself that sort of thing for sure. But next up, we got two
Yeah,
questions from. Go ahead. Do you have something else?
yeah. I was gonna say like they might have missed their moment because you see the like when the right gets mad about wokeness in the military. Um, one of the Mark Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff when he got in that really public spat with Matt Gaetz about white supremacy, he was trying to Gates wouldn't let him finish his case. He was trying to make the point that this is about force readiness, and unit cohesion, because the military is one of the most diverse institutions in America. The officer
Uh
corps,
huh.
sure, there's a bunch of MAGA types, but the officer corps is educated, from grad school degrees and stuff. They've been around diverse groups of people that think differently, and the rank and file are like largely black and brown. And so, if they were going to do a fascist coup, you know what I'm saying? Like they might not have they don't have the military as a willing accomplice so much anymore. So yeah, I
Right.
think the polling data was shocking to people that are a bunch of military towns went for Biden, which just out of pure financial self interest because Democrats are better on veterans benefits and more likely to spend money on soldier pay as opposed to new weapon systems. Um, but also they're just like there's gays in the military now. There's black
Right.
generals and stuff. So yeah.
All right, so we've got two questions here, but they are different. So we'll take them one at a time. Both from Claire Zoznik, something like that. Sorry, Claire.
Yeah.
Czosnek. Zoznik. Claire's first question is, what is the debt ceiling and why is the American economy built on fake money? Yes, Mark, I too would like to answer this question and have no idea what it is. So even though I know we've talked about it before, because it feels like the debt ceiling comes up once a year or so, and it's always apocalyptic. And then so far, they've always like figured it out the last second or whatever, and it's all that sort of like Harry Potter, made up money moving around type shit to me, and I don't understand it either. So, what's fixing to happen? It's all going to come crashing down.
So the debt ceiling, uh, you got to act like an economic historian. Like I can give you the broad outlines, but like it's sort of an anachronistic thing that was invented in the early 1900s when we came off the gold, like after we came off the gold standard, and it's just like it sets a limit on the total amount of money America can borrow. Now, borrow in this sense means sell treasury bills, right? Um, so we always hit it, and conservatives scaremonger over it because they make us sound like it's your budget, but it's not your budget because your debt doesn't come from selling T-bills, right? They're essentially taking investments in America, and it's a stable, very stable investment, which is why people like it. Like China holds a bunch of, U.S. Treasury reserves and stuff, and they could just eliminate it. Um, every time this comes up, they could. That's why people were. It was frustrating, even in the lame duck with the Democratic Senate and House, they didn't just get rid of it. But politically, they seem to see this as a way to force Republicans to try to come to the table and be responsible, to like make them eat their vegetables. But what happens when the Candy Caucus runs shit, right?
What do you mean
When
they
the
can just get
toddlers
rid
just
of
in
it?
the
So the
menu.
debt ceiling is like just an arbitrary limit that's imposed on the amount of debt they can carry. And then when they
Yeah.
start to hit it, it's like, oh, this is a problem if we don't make that number higher, which we have to raise it. But you're
Uh-huh.
saying like there's no real reason the reason even has to be a limit at all. Like it could just,
Right.
why does there have to
Yeah.
be a cap on it? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's like most accounting, like some have money being fake, and money is fiat currency is fake, but also it's real because it's backed by the full faith and credit of the it's worked for over 100 years for a reason. I mean, like future track records based upon past results. It's not like Bitcoin, but it's not like gold either, right? So, what makes the U.S. currency so stable and useful and valuable is that oil is traded in petrodollars. There's lots of things that could go wrong here that would lead to 1920 style fucking crash. And it doesn't have we don't have to actually go over the debt ceiling to do that. You just have to make the market scared, because if everyone starts fleeing into Chinese dollars or whatever, as oil starts being traded in yen, sorry, Chinese yen, then we're become a backwater, and our standard of living. American standard of living isn't guaranteed by God. It's like we don't look what's happening. I mean, England collapsed as an empire. Now is collapsing as a fucking European country. Their economy is getting weaker and weaker and weaker while the EU blows by them. And things don't have to stay this way. And Republicans don't seem to. It's part of they just don't believe expertise. Well, let me take two things. One, they treat this like it's spending, but it's not spending. All right, like they've already spent the money. Congress passed these bills to pay for these programs and whatever boondoggles they wanted to do. And so the U.S. government sold T-bills to get the money to do that spending. And now the interest is coming due on those T-bills, right?
Right.
So, this part of this, but they don't believe economists. When economists tell them this is going to be a horrific fucking disaster, and I might be for the economics profession, but this isn't like some abstract theory. This is just, when you don't pay your mortgage, the bank comes and takes your house, right? That's what this is, and they don't believe that there's any banks can come take their house. But
who's the bank coming to take the house in this scenario? China or what?
So bond rates are based upon ratings, right? And the rating is based upon how dependable you are when paying back your debts. You know how when you don't make a credit card payment, your interest rate balloons?
Yeah.
All right. So U.S. dollars would get way more expensive, right? So like it's just like there's not like a single entity. It's like the Iron Bank on Game of Thrones is going to finance another army. It's just that our American treasuries will not be nearly as valuable, which means we can't borrow. It makes it much more harder and more expensive to borrow money to pay for stuff like Social Security and Medicaid and our army and shit, right? But borrowing in this sense is like this is the fake part of it. The American treasury system is not the same as your credit card. It's just not. It's if you can say borrow $1 trillion and pay 2% interest on it, while the economy grows at 3 or 4%, and you're investing in real time stuff that makes life better for people. That's a good investment. It's profitable. It's not like you're not doing anything that's going to fuck you up. What will fuck you up is not paying your bills. So anyway, it's long, complicated, and stupid. But the 14th Amendment and 14th Amendment has a clause in it because the way they borrowed money to pay for the Civil War, that the U.S. shall not default on its debts, or some wording of some such. So Biden has a constitutional argument that he can just keep fucking borrowing money, right? Even if they don't raise the limit. But Supreme Court being the Supreme Court, that would go. There's also an option because the federal government, you guys might have heard about the $1 trillion coin. The Treasury can mint currencies and whatever they want. So they could just print $1 trillion coin and deposit it in Treasury, and that would go around the debt limit. Now, it seems clownish. We probably get
Yeah.
made fun of it for it. But again, all this stuff's fake. That's fake too. It's
Right.
all fucking,
That's
just do it.
that's why it's also hard for me to understand is when you use examples like that and I'm like, "Oh, but that's nothing. Like that's a parlor trick, but it
Mm-hmm.
works." I don't know. It just makes it all seem like you said clownish. It just like
Yeah.
highlights how completely made up it all so clearly is, yet
Yeah.
it's like the most important shit in the world.
Right. Right.
It's
So, yeah, I
wild.
mean, I'd rather Biden do some clown shit like printing the $1 trillion coin than, having the, we all essentially work for like four companies, and the parent company is a tech company, and I'm sure they're heavily leveraged in debt. So if money gets more expensive, then I'm unemployed immediately. And so I'd rather Biden do that than you know be homeless. But
Yeah.
I don't know what he's afraid of, a bad news cycle or whatever. But yeah,
Um, all right. So Claire's second question is, why does the military budget need to be bigger than it was in the past 20 years since we have left Afghanistan? That war was costly, but now that there's no American involvement, why did Congress not only maintain the overinflated military budget, but actually increase it? So I don't think it's ever going to go down. The military budget only increases and only
hmm
ever will, in my opinion, regardless of what kind of shit is going on with war or whatnot. Part of how that works in every department of the whole, in every different faction of the whole Department of Defense, I guarantee it's the same way. Every one of them, because when I worked for the Department of Energy, it was like this too. Uh, the budget always gets used no matter
yeah,
what, and it doesn't. It they'll use it on at the DOE that like the maintenance department or whatever would use the budget to repaint the parking lot that they had repainted every year for the past 5 years or whatever, like shit like that, stuff that's just abjectly unnecessary. And
hmm
I know the Department of Defense is doing all kinds of that shit. I worked with people that used to work in contracting for the Department of Defense, and they tell me stories about having these big projects. They had to figure out how to disposition, 1 million jets or something that never got used but couldn't be. Like I used to hear shit like that all the time. But what was funny is if you would ask these people, you'd be like, "So don't you think that maybe they could stand to have a little bit less of a budget or whatever?" They'd be like appalled. They'd be like, "No, absolutely not. No, see, they've got to keep, even though we're not using them, we got to keep those systems running at the proper rate.
hmm
Because if we do need them, then, we can't, they won't have lost anything or any momentum. There won't be any rush to shake off." I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that was basically the argument I would get. So they're very married to all that. They make sure the budget never is unused, because if it's unused, then it'll go down, and it can't ever go down. And that's just sort of how the whole thing operates. And you're not allowed to question or criticize the military's budget on either side, basically. So yeah, I'm not even a little bit surprised by that. War or no war, that shit's only ever going
yeah,
to go up in the near future,
yeah.
at least.
I mean, shit. Like we've gone so far away from this. Even like when the Cold War ended, I think even George H.W. Bush was like, "We can cut the Pentagon budget now," because they called it a peace dividend or whatever. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like, my buddy, high school buddy John, was in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Idaho. I might have mentioned this before. And this medium-sized Air Force base had two golf courses on it. And the reason was they had money left over. They already had one golf course. Like, we got to do something with this money, so they built a second golf course.
Right. Yeah, right.
But private companies do that too, man. I've done a bunch of gigs as a comedy writer for both political nonprofits and like sponsored content for where these are just marketing departments who have to blow their budget and they do something stupid, which is fine with me because I get paid for it and it's easy. But like, whatever, I'll participate in your ruse. But yeah, I mean, I don't the particulars of it. If you want to, like, the cynic in me is like, well, you got Congress people who get donations from defense contractors, and also in exchange for the defense contractor building factories in their districts, which further cement the relationship. So that's one end of it for why they get so much government funding. But also on the ask end, you've got generals and admirals and so forth who take retirement gigs on the board of defense contractors, and they know what it is. If you asked in a line item to have 100 new Bell helicopters, when you retire, there's a job waiting at Bell helicopter for it, right? So it's like, it's all that. It's also a bunch of money for Ukraine in there, which I don't object to. And did you follow the tank thing, Trey?
Uh, what tank thing?
So Ukraine was asking for a bunch of Leopard tanks from Germany, and Germany was refusing to give them. And so there were a bunch of protests in Germany for Germany to send the tanks, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, Germany was like, "Okay, we'll send tanks if America sends tanks," and we were like, "But Ukraine can't use our tanks. Like A1 Abrams tanks are like." If you don't have good supply chain logistics like we do, like they apparently burn 3 gallons of jet fuel per mile. So they need to be refueled constantly. So if you can't keep them refueled, they're just not any good. So the Leopard tank was a better fit for them. We're like, okay, we'll send 31 tanks. It was enough for like one tank battalion or whatever. And we'll get them delivered to you in the next 18 months or so. So now Germany's like, okay, we'll send the Leopard tanks. And we like jerk off. Okay, here's 31 tanks you can't use. So Germany has political cover. So Russia's just not mad at them specifically. And it's just like, okay, so how much does 31 tanks cost that Ukraine's going to like dump in a hole?
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Next up, we got a question from Eden Stewart. It says, "Hey there, fellas. Any thoughts regarding what will happen in Florida and Ron DeSantis' attacks on the structure and makeup of universities there? I work for a university. There's more political interference than people think. Our funding was cut a few years ago because our state legislatures were mad at the Black Lives Matter protests that were happening on campus. I guess they wanted the campus to suppress free speech or punish the protesters. Nonetheless, funding was removed. Fast forward a few years when COVID broke out, and our university was quietly doing COVID research and whispering encouragement of vaccinations to our staff. The university did not want to go out publicly to support vaccines due to fears our red state would punish the university with more budget cuts." Mark, you know anything about that? I mean, that sounds about right to me, but I don't have any, knowledge of it. Of
Yeah.
course.
I was reading some of the stuff yesterday. Like, it's kind of jarring how little the university leaders are standing up to DeSantis in any way, shape, or form. Because he's essentially asking all individual professors to report any like problematic, like politically incorrect stuff to the state. Like politically incorrect meaning which not. I'm using it in the original term of the word, like not mean left wing, but ones that don't align with the state's political priorities. It's like, oh, self-report. Do you talk about race in your class? And like, well, I'm a sociologist, so yeah,
Right.
there's one guy one professor who's publicly standing up to DeSantis and continue to teach his course on like he basically I think they do outings where they go to like the sites of some horrific racial crimes in Florida and lynchings and so forth. And he teaches about the history of white supremacy in Florida, and he's just continuing to teach his class. So that if everybody did that, it would probably work. But that one guy is probably going to end up fired, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, DeSantis winning in a landslide in November was dispiriting, to say the least.
Uh-huh.
I can't tell because his actual economic program. If you guys haven't followed DeSantis' career closely, he was one of the founders of the House Freedom Caucus when he was in Congress for the first 3 terms. So his politics on policy are essentially to the right of Paul Ryan and somewhere around Lauren Boebert's, right? But this culture war nonsense seems to be popular with people who don't pay close attention or think about the implications of it. But also, what he wants to do is, end Social Security and the New Deal welfare state and roll us back to corporate regulations, in 1920. And that's the usual Republican ruse, is to run on culture war stuff and then rob from poor people. But like, I don't know how this ends for him, man, because it seems to be working, at least in Florida. I don't think it's going to work on a national stage because he doesn't have the juice, man. Doesn't have charisma. Like we talked about it in the last Patreon episode. We're talking about potential Democratic presidential candidates, and Biden doesn't run, but like none of them seem, I think we talked about Kamala, but I think DeSantis is the same thing. Where he doesn't come across well on TV, even though I know he's a psychopath. But his problem is he comes across like a psychopath. But as far as Florida's university system, because they're trying to turn was it New College into Hillsdale College? Hillsdale College is like a right wing psychopath factory in Michigan, and they're trying to turn the state's flagship liberal arts school into that. Like they openly profess that. So yeah, I don't, I don't know how that
Yeah.
stands, man. I
Now, yeah, I mean,
hopefully.
Florida, Florida was like one of the swing states for a long time, pretty
Mhm.
famously. Like them in Ohio were the linchpins, and now Florida's like just
Yeah.
full bore ruby red. It seems like it's definitely like I feel like people still haven't gotten entirely used to the fact that that's what's happened in Florida because they still
Mhm.
talk like Florida's, could go either way. At least in the past few elections, it's been that way. But I feel like now at this point, it's like, yeah, I ain't seeing that. I don't know if it's because so many people fled there in recent years, during COVID and shit like that. Like people have always moved to Florida, you know what I mean? And now I
Mhm.
feel like there's been a certain type of people who've been really moving to Florida and it hasn't helped. Or I don't know,
Mhm.
maybe it's just the sun's finally catching up to them. What are you going to do? But either way, yeah, it's getting
Weather's
wild down
nice in the
there.
wintertime. It's low taxes. I mean, it's a nice place to retire.
Yeah,
But yeah, like Florida and Ohio have both gone deep red. Like North Carolina
right.
is more of a swing state than Florida is now by a mile. But like the National Party won't let go of the idea of Florida, probably because there's so many electoral votes there. It's the third most populous state in the country, I think. Third or fourth. I
Right.
don't know off the top of my head. But like, yeah. So I don't know. It feels like it's time to like give up on the state as far as state races go because Rubio won a landslide too, and the motherfucker's got the charisma of a dead clam or some shit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. Well, all right. Moving on. Matt has got a subsection of questions here that he titled "On a Lighter Note." So we'll see. First up is from Melody Ford. Says, "Hey gentlemen, you all rock and are a true lifeline for those of us suffering from bad news overload. You know that, right? As my grandpa said, you have to laugh at life or it will kill you. Yeah, because that's what we do is avoid sharing bad news or being pessimistic or anything on this show. Always sunshine and
Dude,
rainbows here at the Skews, guys. Always a sunny, positive outlook from us
yeah.
two.
So the behind the scenes thing on me and Trey's group text with Corey and Drew. Drew just the other day he said Andy just asked me. Andy's his wife. Did you hear about the guy who killed two people with his car and then he was murdered when he got out on bail in Santa Monica? And he goes, "No, why?" And she said, "I think this felt like something Mark would tell you on the thread." And I was like, "Oh shit! How does Drew's wife have me pegged so bad?" I'm like, "Oh, here's an awful thing to happen. You guys want to hear about it?" No, I actually didn't even know anything about that. But yeah, I've always had a pretty dark sense of humor, and the news is overload. So it's like it's fun to have an outlet to talk about it. And I've always been a news junkie even from the time when I was a kid. I don't know why. And I wish I could turn it off, but I like knowing stuff that's happening, then being sad about it, but also like laughing about it. So there you go.
But yeah, thank you, Melody. That's very, very kind of you to say.
Yeah, thank
We
you, Melody.
just
Yeah.
do what we do. Well, it is what it is. Bam Bam's mama, who's a longtime listener and contributor here, says this is for both Mark and Trey and also anyone else who wants to answer in the comments. What is your choice of protein for flavoring collard greens? I like smoked turkey neck or ham hocks. Recently went to a restaurant that put bacon bits in it, and I was so upset it ruined my night. For me, it's the same two that you already named. I go with whichever one I can find at the grocery store here in California. Sometimes they have both, but sometimes it's either or situation. But yeah, that's generally my go-to. So nothing too surprising. I agree with you about bacon. If you mean like fucking bacon bits or
Yeah.
whatever, like that is an abomination. You know, um, yeah, that ain't
It
it.
doesn't even.
I don't know.
Those are made with soy, aren't they? Aren't they fake?
Yeah, I think yeah. But there's
Yeah,
also,
that
I
doesn't.
mean, the bacon bits. She could just mean like chopped up actual
Right.
bacon or something, depending on the place. But yeah,
I
if
hope
you mean
so.
like bacon bits, then that's
Yeah.
insane and asinine.
Yeah.
You been making collard greens, Mark?
Nah, I mean, I do. I'll throw them in. I like to make one pan dishes, so I'll cook up some tilapia and toss some greens in there. But I don't like. My mom and my granny used to make them with ham hocks. I don't think I've ever had smoked turkey neck collard greens. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
regional thing. I don't know. Um, I got a fun bacon bit story.
Okay. Go
So
ahead.
when I was in college, one of my good friends, his name was Karam, and he was ethnically Pakistani, but he'd grown up in the United Arab Emirates, and he was Muslim, but he was kind of Muslim. It was really funny because but at the beginning of freshman year, he was still praying 5 times a day. You know, like he actually stopped cross country practice to do his prayers. And by the end of the first semester of freshman year, his prayer rug was hanging on the college dorm room because it looked cool under the black light when he was high. So that's what college would do to your kid. Make
Uh-huh.
him cool as fuck. So he obviously didn't eat pork. And like one time, like our sweet mate, who was a weird jerk, um, sold him some leftover pizza for a few bucks. And it was Papa John's. The pepperoni was under the cheese. And thought he was going to fight the guy over it, right? Because he tricked him into eating pork.
Right.
So fast forward senior year, we got an apartment off campus and we're living together. And I had made some suddenly salad with some suddenly salad, the pre-bought pasta salad stuff,
Hell
right?
yeah.
All
I
right,
used to really fuck with Suddenly Salad. I ain't had it in a
yeah,
minute, but it used to be a popular item. Think I can
yeah.
see where this is going, maybe.
One of my cheap college dishes was to just dump a can of tuna or a can of chicken in a Sunday salad. And you got it like 2 meals, right? So, but I had some leftovers, and he ate it one day, and he was like, "What are those little crunchy things? They're really
Yeah.
good." I'm like, "Bro, that's bacon bits." And he got so upset. I thought he was going to throw up that he liked bacon, but
Yeah.
I didn't. But he'd eaten my leftovers, so I just didn't tell him they were fake. I just
Right.
let him suffer, thinking he'd poisoned himself with
Yeah.
pork.
Well, I was about
But
to say, I mean, you can't just everybody's had a roommate who has done that. And I'm not going to I mean, I'm sure I've done that too, but you can't just be eating somebody else's leftovers. I mean, that's what you get. Eat somebody else's
yeah,
leftovers and curse yourself before God or however them rules work. Uh, you got to stay
me
on
my
top of that.
I had another ex-Muslim friend who just like some things you become accustomed to eating things like I wouldn't eat dog no matter how delicious you convinced me it was because I just find the idea disgusting. Or you know, some cultures do that. Same with cats. Um, so like even if people that lose their faith are still grossed out by pork, right? So like my friend Bob, he hadn't eaten pork his entire life. And then one day he tried bacon and he ate bacon every meal. It was so fucking good. He ate bacon every meal for like a month until he got gout.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
Bacon
bacon
be
bits.
like that.
Uh-huh.
Uh, all right. This next one, I've been trying to sort of pull up some stuff because I saw it coming and I haven't really got my head around it yet. But this is from Ira Romph, who says, "Here's one out of left field. Have you been following the Hasbro Wizards of the Coast D&D drama? I would love to get your thoughts on the whole mess. Again, I'm trying to look it up. Mark, do you already know anything about it?
No, but I'm intrigued. I want to know what the Dungeons and Dragons drama is between Hasbro.
I can't. All right. So the it looks like Wizards of the Coast, which owns Dungeons and Dragons. I'm skimming this and doing my best, but they ended something called the OGL, which is the Open Game License, which is a copyright license that allows third party creators to use basic rules or aspects from Dungeons and Dragons. Essentially open sources a lot of the core mechanics of the game so third parties can create and distribute content legally. Creators are allowed to
Mm.
monetize some of the content, even that relating to specific Wizards of the Coast properties. Uh, in essence, the OGL allows creators to use aspects of D&D for their own creations while allowing Wizards of the Coast to still own Dungeons and Dragons. This has led to a massive amount of interest around Dungeons and Dragons, where an entire little industry has popped up making, selling, or distributing products related to the game, which has led to a lot of growth for the game in general. And I guess they have ended that. And so people can't do that anymore. And a lot of people are really pissed off about it. And that's what I can tell from just looking it up in these few seconds here based on the question. Because I did not know about it before that. No.
I will say that like American IP law is a ridiculous nightmare. It's both bad for creative types and also bad for consumers. And like as a person who does creative stuff, I like having some ownership over my own work and all the contracts we sign try to give us some percentage of that or we sign it away. But let me give you an example. Like you watch a show like John Oliver's. I don't know if people realize this, but like the shows are very rhythmic, and this nothing about the creative people behind its fault. But like when you show a video clip from a commercial or a campaign ad or a person speaking, someone owns the license to that. So in order to fair use it, which means you're using it, you're not going to pay for it. You have to make fun of it. So when like John Oliver comes out of a video clip and roasts the guy's necktie for 30 seconds, it's not necessarily because they thought that was the best joke. It's because you have to point to something specific in it, or your lawyer won't let you use the clip. Right.
Right.
So that's one example. But also like people use DMC10, the Digital Millennium Copyright notices to like crush criticism of themselves, like to keep themselves from being satirized, which satire, as a comic writer and a general person who likes free speech is important to me. But anyway, so yeah, that specific time, that's a good example because I doubt the actual creator of the game is seeing $1 of that, but the corporation owns the rights to the game, and they're fucking over a bunch of other creative people who could make $1 or just share their joy.
Yes,
and yeah, I've seen those books that people run up their own D&D campaigns and stuff. Yeah,
right. Because I'm assuming the corporation at some point was. It sounds like, again, what I read is the only thing I have read on it, but it sounds like a corporation being like, we're letting a lot of money out the door, just letting these people do all this shit whenever they want to or whatever. Like they really should have to pay us or something. Like we shouldn't just let them be doing this for free. You know how much money they're making? It's a whole cottage industry. We can't have that. And that's why they shut it down. And then, but that shit was part of what was keeping their whole thing alive and gave value to it in the first place. So they fucked themselves over because of short-sightedness and greed.
Right.
Is what my read on the situation would be as someone who just found out about it 5 minutes ago. Because it's a pretty typical story, I think.
Right. You could also just like the person's writing up D&D campaigns or whatever that everyone likes. You'd be like, oh shit, let's hire that person. Yeah. Instead of like trying to put them out of business, buy their company and give them a chunk of money. And like then you have more campaigns, you have more stuff to sell to people, more enthusiasm for the game, and somebody gets paid for having a good idea. But that's not how lawyers do.
No. All right. Kimber Reed says, howdy, y'all. No question, really. Just want to say hi, and I'll see you in Orlando. That's for me. Yeah, thanks, Kimber.
Hi, Kimber.
Appreciate you. A user with the name of Someone Once Said says, this question is not directly about Skews. Why do your comedy shows only allow 18 plus to attend? I'd love to be able to take my 17-year-old daughter to the show in Lexington. We've attended a comedy show where they allow teens at the Louisville Comedy Club. The show you guys did last year in Lexington was tamer than the one Gabriel Rutledge did at the Louisville Club, where my then 16-year-old daughter was allowed to go. So that has nothing to do with me. I've done shows where there were 9-year-olds in the crowd. I'm not super into that, but hey, however people want to parent is up to them. And also, I didn't know until afterwards, so it was totally fine. It's not like it fucked me up or nothing. But I mean, that's just so people know, that's 100% the venue's prerogative. Some of them, and it's different in different places in different states. It's like whatever. If you want to sell booze or whatever, be considered this type of business, then you can't let minors in or whatever. And whatever causes them to make those decisions, they make them. And it's totally up to them. It's never my call. So if I do a show at a venue that it's for all ages, then, that's how it works. And like I said, I've done that, and there's been kids at my shows before. But if I'm at a venue where they don't do that, then that's just their rules. So I don't ever get into like haggling with or arguing with them over their age policy. It's just up to the venue itself.
If I had to guess, I bet it is based upon local liquor laws and ordinances. For the most part, but also comedy clubs make all their money off selling booze. So you'd understand why it would hit for them to have a bunch of 16, 17-year-olds in the crowd who can't, buy any. But neither Trey nor when I did stand up did anyone ever ask us our opinion on who should be, what age the audience should be.
Yeah. So sorry about that. Although it is just one more year, and I tend to come back to Lexington about every year. So hopefully it won't be too long. All right. These next two, Mark, are... We maybe should have skipped ahead to these last week, but we didn't. So I'll go ahead and read them. The first was from Valerie Weber, who says, "How about them Cowboys? And, she smartly says, it's time to gloat today before they run into the 49ers. I'm also perennially frustrated that raising the cap on Social Security is a non starter. I pay Social Security tax on every dime I make, but people who make high salaries only pay tax on a fraction of their income, which is infuriating. Thanks for all you do. And then because it's also about the Cowboys, I'll also read Shannon McIntyre's underneath that says, I also have to say, how about them Cowboys? So glad to wipe that annoying smirk off of Tom Brady's face. Hope Brett gets to keep his job, poor guy. I'm at a point right now I get too upset to talk much about politics, but keep doing what you're doing. You're both great. Parasocial relationships for the win. So, yeah, Cowboys was looking up when people wrote these questions, but
Uh huh. Yeah.
not so
Yeah.
anymore.
No, we were expected to lose, and that's what happened. It
Yeah.
just had like typical Cowboys fashion, just had to happen. We can't lose in a normal way, especially against the 49ers. So they're just
No.
extreme stupidity. Even if you don't like football, Google the final play of the game and just laugh your
Yeah.
ass off.
It's so funny because it's like they were in a almost impossible to win situation. Everyone knew the game was pretty much over. And they could have just ran a regular Hail Mary play or whatever, and it wouldn't have been that noteworthy. It's just a game
Mhm.
that they didn't put it together at the end. They lost. But instead, they, for some reason, had to run this like fucking schoolyard oop-de-oop bullshit that made no sense and got them like 8 yards and turned the whole thing into like a meme-worthy joke outcome.
It
uh it's almost like that's what they wanted to happen or something.
like
Like,
it makes it more embarrassing, but at least it was entertaining. So I'll give them that.
yeah.
So let's talk about something less depressing than the Cowboys, and that's getting old and dying. So Social Security. So yeah. So going back to the debt limit fight, which I had a question about earlier, the debt ceiling. The federal government, like half the federal government spending is Social Security and Medicaid, and another like I don't know 20% is the military. If you just look at the overall majority of what the federal government does, it's a retirement program with an army. All right.
Yeah.
So so Republicans are saying we have to cut a bunch of spending in order for us to vote to raise the debt limit. All right. And everybody's like, well, that means cutting Social Security and Medicaid. And they go, oh, no, it doesn't. But it absolutely does. And I saw a bunch of people being honest about it, saying, yes, people are living longer and are healthier. So we need to raise the retirement age. And that to me, sure, straightforward logically, I guess it makes a little sense. But it also is extremely bleak to me that how work obsessed we are in this country. It's like, yeah, we've improved your lifespan. So the trade-off is we've got to extend the shittier part of your life, not the
Yeah.
good part.
We've improved your lifespan so that you could give us more of it. It's like
Yes.
if we weren't going to make you give us more of it, we wouldn't let you have those extra years. What are you, fucking stupid? You think you just get those
Yeah.
years for free? No, we'll give you a few more years as long as you give those to us and don't complain about it.
Yeah. You get the hostage taker with a gun to your head saying you can have a few more years of your life, but you got to use them to make us money, right?
Right.
Instead of playing with your grandkids or taking a trip. So yeah, I find it extremely frustrating and bleak. And Valerie's right. Like I don't understand why they break Social Security taxes out from regular income tax and make it a different thing where it phases out at a certain level of income. Just take that 2 or 3% or whatever and apply it to everybody. I know it'd be a tax hike for rich people, and that's why they won't do it. And it's also understanding the fairness arguments where everybody gets paid out the same Social Security. So why would I have to pay a bunch more into it just because I have more money? And the answer to that is because you're rich and you're lucky. Sorry, some people don't have as good as you, so you got to chip in a little more. It's like I don't understand how people act like society is different than like in a personal relationship. If my mom's on a budget and I take her out to eat, I pick up the tab, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think Matt's in here in the question document messing around a little bit, but well, it's all right, Matt. Do your thing. There's 3 more questions at the bottom, and if I remember Matt correctly, he put these down here because he said they had come up before, but we're still gonna get into them. The first one I know has come up before. It's from Thought Storms. It's about ranked choice voting. They say there isn't one silver bullet to fix all the nation's problems, but this one is close, and people on many sides agree. How can
I
we
got
get
it.
more people understanding how brilliant it is, how much money it'll save, how much fairer than our insane current system? Beloved candidates like Bernie Sanders and or Elizabeth Warren could have easily been president if not for our insane system of elections. Your thoughts on this? Yeah, I know we've talked
Yeah.
about it before. I know you're a big proponent. It's not that I'm not. I just have remained dumb about the whole thing. That's all.
No, yeah. I mean, it's we talked about it before, but basically, it would allow people to vote the way they want and not risk a disaster. Like you could vote for Nader first, Gore second, and Bush third. Who lived in Florida, and once Nader was eliminated, Gore would have gotten your vote, and George W. Bush would have been president, right? But our
Right.
system makes you choose between Nader and Gore, so therefore votes got split, and Bush became president. Um, it also, I think, would make things saner because you would have multi-party. We'd have a true multi-party system. Like DSA or Green Party or Libertarian candidates would be viable. They wouldn't have to make the lesser of the evil choice, right? You could just vote for who you wanted, and I think that would make it better. Also, multi-member districts would be cool. Yeah, yeah. But there's lots of stuff that would be cool that
Right.
won't happen. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think we had a third party. I think we had a third party question last week, and I was basically like, the way you win is by running an insurgent campaign inside a political party that already exists, which is what Bernie tried to do and what Trump successfully did.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think this would allow a third party to be, hey, vote for us. It'll count unless we lose. And then you could be like, okay, that sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Then Pamela Mang says, "Pardon the dainty lady language, but I'm fucking livid at the continued murder of unarmed black people by cops. Keenan Anderson was the most recent victim who died after being tased multiple times. Was he acting a fool? Yes. Did he need to be detained and evaluated for a potential psychiatric hold? Yes. As a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, I could probably hold an assault rifle at the cops and they would deploy their gentle de-escalation techniques. Love you. Appreciate all you do." Yeah. Whatever happened with that Memphis one, by the way?
They arrested the 5 cops today.
Okay.
That one's a deeply weird one because they fired those 5 cops almost immediately, and then the video footage is due to come out in the next couple of days, and they arrested them before it came out. So they're definitely,
It's got to be pretty bad.
yeah, they beat a guy to death. And that one, Memphis, Memphis is a heavily black city, and all 5 cops were black, including the person that killed. And so this doesn't like break down clearly among like racism lines, although we all know
Right.
that all cops are prone to be more suspicious of black people, even if they themselves are black, because racism is so baked into our society that everyone has it, even if, you know. Anyway, so Keenan Anderson's that teacher in LA, right? Who flagged cops down in the middle of a traffic stop. Like he flagged them down for help and they killed him. So I haven't followed specifics of it, but like it just seems like the Atlanta cops killed a climate protester in their Cop City thing, which is getting Brian Kemp sending the National Guard to crush that, protest. It's a combination of like Antifa, anarchists, and environmental protesters because they're clearing a 85-acre forest, I think, to make room for a fake city for cops to practice putting down civil unrest in.
Right.
So it's a whole bunch of bad shit happening at once. It's like, why do you need to practice
Yeah.
putting down protests? And they're
Right.
like,
Well,
don't worry
because
about
they're
it.
like, well, because it's not like we're going to stop shooting people. And when you do that, they want to have a protest. And, we need to be able to put that down. And then, and it's just a never ending cycle. It's obvious, Mark. They need to be trained in putting down protests effectively if they're going to keep causing all these protests with their
Yeah.
actions and steadfast refusal to adapt or change at all.
And the Atlanta cop unions and I think the police chief, their argument was like, well, after the George Floyd protests, we need like the morale boost. And like, you couldn't successfully win public opinion the way you handle protests. So you want to build a play area where you can practice winning fights with civilians. It's like all
Right.
fucking bleak as shit.
Yeah.
There's a case in Maryland. I can't remember the kid's name right now, but white cop killed a white kid, and I think we talked this before, but really it's poor people that cops murder. That obviously there's a racial component to it, but if you're poor and white, you're also much more likely to get shot by cops.
Drew being a public defender, I remember I'd had that conversation with him before, like years ago, and when he was still working as a public defender, and I was like, dude, I feel like, it ain't like cops fuck with poor, or like. It ain't like cops like poor white people either. They'll fuck poor white people. I got plenty of them in my family who fucking hate cops because they've been fucked over by them, and everybody knows that. And Drew was always like, yes, that is also true, but it is definitely still worse for the poor black people than the poor white people
Sure,
when it
sure.
comes to the cops and this type of thing. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I'm
but
I'm
yeah,
not I'm not trying to make a false equivalence. I'm saying there is some like class solidarity here that
for
like
sure.
poor white people should have beef with cops too. Is my point.
Absolutely.
Not that
That's
it's as
I've made
big.
multiple videos about that idea,
Yeah.
like the idea that we should be aligned on that issue. Poor people of every race, because it's like, since when do rednecks like cops? Rednecks have never liked
Mhm.
cops, or white trash people have never liked cops until it became racially divided. Now all of a sudden they're back in the blue, and it's fucking absurd. But yeah, I don't know. It's dumb.
Yeah. There's a. I'm about to quote a couple songs here, but there's a. Is it Shooter? Shoot, God damn it, Shooter Jennings has a song.
Yeah.
I think it's called the White Trash Song, where he talks about it like a sheriff walks up to him, and asks him how he felt not being free, sort of taunting him. So I'd rather. It didn't hurt a whole much, didn't hurt a whole lot. I'd rather be locked up in jail and hell than a fat bellied cop. So that's
Yeah.
sort of how all of us felt about him before the St. Louis protest. But
Right.
so I brought that kid because like that case was revolved. Only one national reporter I saw was even following it all. So what happened was this kid was having a mental health problem. He called the cops himself to come help him because he was afraid he was going to hurt himself. Now that may have been a bait and switch where he wanted to do a suicide by cop. The suicide by cop totally worked because the cop unloaded his whole clip on this kid who was on his knees. Um, and the cop, when this he was state police officer, when the state police vindicated him, um, he put air quote around vindicated. He posted on his Facebook about how basically the only thing that matters is whether you come home at the end of the day, and like that really stuck with me because I think the average person thinks that police officer's job is to put themselves between you and harm, right?
Uh-uh.
But they're openly saying, and they have this common expression they say where it's better to be tried by 12 and carried by 6, meaning go
Right.
on trial for murder than it is to have your own funeral. It's like, but like we think of their jobs as to risk their own lives, and they're openly telling each other, no, the most important thing is that you stay alive. Your life is worth more than other people's lives.
Right.
So that part is really jarring to me. But yeah,
Well,
I
also,
mean,
they hasn't the Supreme Court, like the old Supreme Court, I don't even mean recently, like found on
mhm,
multiple occasions basically that cops have no obligation to protect or serve, which are the
no,
two things in their slogan, but they don't actually have an obligation to do that to protect an average citizen or anything like that. Like, now cops are there to
no,
protect like rich people's fucking property and shit.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the phrase is they have no affirmative duty to act, affirmative duty to help. Like the famous example is the sheriff's deputy school resource officer who ran outside Parkland High School during the school shooting and hid
Yeah. Yeah.
while teachers were throwing their lives in front of bullets. That guy, again, he was never going to be in legal trouble, and this goes in general for everywhere. Like they're only in professional trouble if their boss chooses to get mad at them, right? Now, that cop was so embarrassing that the sheriff's department did fire him, but the union filed a grievance and they rehired him quietly later. So, as far as I know, that cop still works at the department. I haven't looked it up recently. But yeah, so that guy ran away from the Parkland shooting while kids were getting murdered. No legal responsibility, no professional responsibility. And when the families tried to sue him, the court said he had qualified immunity because he was acting in the course of his duties, which is a really funny way to phrase that because in nothing he was doing to me has involves the word duty, but whatever.
Right.
So to answer your question about this wouldn't happen to white people, and I think you quote another country song, but Tyler Childers 2 albums ago, he's a great bluegrass artist that I know Trey likes too. But
Yeah.
he did a instrumental album that the last song had lyrics as a surprise. He didn't tell anybody, but the song's called "Long Violent History," and it's basically I find the last verse. Bit, he talks about how people think he's stupid because of his accent. Um, yeah, he says the world's called me belligerent, took me for ignorant, but ain't never once made me scared just to be. Could you imagine just constantly worrying, kicking and fighting, begging to breathe? How many boys could they haul off this mountain, shoot full of holes, cuffed and laid in the streets, to be coming to town in stark raving anger, looking for answers and armed to the teeth? 30-06s, Papaw's old pistol. How many you reckon would it be, 4 or 5? Or would that be the start of a long, violent history of tucking our tails as we try to abide? Now that resonated with me because he's essentially saying that like we just expect black people to eat so much shit for stuff we wouldn't tolerate, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
go listen to that song. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, that was that's another point that I've brought up before when bitching about this stuff. I'll repost the same video every not every time that somebody else gets killed, but it remains relevant, and that's pretty much the general thrust of it. Is like it's ridiculous that there's no sympathy from like our people for them on this matter for a whole host of reasons, but so the last one, and Matt has written something in here for you. Matt, I'm gonna tell you what I'm doing too. We're ending on this, our last thing. A technical note. Taryn Tybalt says, "Hello, not related to the post, but can y'all fix the RSS feed? Every time you try to export it to a podcast app, it says error. The Patreon audio player sucks. So many people like to subscribe in their favorite podcast app, plus less chance of missing an episode that way. Other creators I follow have had a similar issue that they were able to fix by contacting Patreon. Thank you." Matt, who y'all know refuses to speak, has written a note in here underneath this that says, "Fixing this is a priority for me this week. We did it last year, but then we started having problems again. So producer Matt is on the case. I also will, if he runs into issues, or Matt, if you have trouble with that, you can't figure that out, I will ask my contact at Patreon about it and try to get some guidance for us or whatever. So we'll try to get that
Oh,
addressed. Sorry for that."
you know Mr. Patreon?
Yeah,
You got him on
old man
speed dial?
Patreon. Yeah, close personal friend of mine. But yeah, we'll try to get that fixed.
Nice.
Thank you guys for all the great prompts and questions. Sorry it took us 2 hours to get through them, but at least we did. We covered them all.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here. We'll be back in the future, I do reckon. So that's it for now. So you bye.
Skews.